with, I think a lot of people is almost construed as backward.
With 21 #1 hits and 22 Grammys, Vince Gill was the golden voice of country music. But in 2000, he did something that turned half his fans against him. He married Amy Grant. Both had just divorced their spouses, and the Christian community branded it as adultery. Radio stations banned their music, and protesters with hate signs showed up at his concerts. Now, 25 years later, health problems are piling up, and at 67, the man who once had everything is watching it slip away. Vince Gill was born on April 12, 1957, in Norman, Oklahoma, in a home where law and music collided in the most unexpected way. His father, a federal judge, could play the banjo, guitar, and harmonica like a seasoned bluegrass veteran. After courtroom sessions, Judge Gill often came home and joined late-night jam sessions with his wife, Jiren, who also played the harmonica. Young Vince would lie in bed, listening to the music drift through the hallway, while neighbors still recall those summer nights when guitar and harmonica sounds spilled onto the street. This unusual blend of courtroom discipline and porch-picking joy shaped Vince deeply. But his early life wasn't easy. Born with crossed eyes, he had to undergo 2 painful surgeries, and even then, his left eye would wander when he was tired or upset. He later confessed to wearing glasses not just to see better but to hide the eye that made him feel broken. Bullied by classmates, Vince began avoiding people and stayed home with his guitar, not running from the world, but building a new one. At age 10, tragedy struck when his half-brother Bob suffered a devastating car accident, leaving him with permanent brain damage. For over 25 years, Bob required full-time care, forcing Judge Gill to take on extra legal work, and the stress cracked his parents' marriage. Bob passed away in 1993 from a heart attack caused by his injuries, a loss that stayed with Vince and bled into his music, giving it the kind of emotional weight that quietly breaks hearts. Vince's musical journey began at 5 when, during a visit to his grandmother's, he picked up her acoustic guitar and started playing Old Shep without a single lesson. By 10, his family bought him a Gibson ES335 electric guitar, an $800 gift in 1967, worth over $6,500 today, cementing their belief that Vince wasn't just a kid with a hobby, but a true musician. Music became his escape. He'd spend 6 to 8 hours a day playing alone in the basement, and his music teacher later noted that Vince's aching, soulful tone was far beyond his years. In high school, he formed a bluegrass band called Mountain Smoke, and on March 4, 1976, they opened for the rock band Kiss. The crowd, expecting fire and leather, booed the fiddles and banjos, even throwing cups and shoes. Frustrated, Vince flipped off the crowd, mooned them, and stormed off stage, a raw, unforgettable moment that ended the band. But Vince pressed on, moving to Kentucky to join Bluegrass Alliance, and then Boone Creek alongside a young Ricky Skaggs in 1977. Though short-lived, their modern twist on bluegrass left a lasting impact. That same year, Vince moved to Los Angeles and joined Sundance, led by fiddle legend Byron Berlin. They played the iconic Palomino Club and rubbed shoulders with Emmylou Harris and Linda Ronstadt. Within a year of being booed off stage, Vince was now performing with Grammy winners. In September 1978, Pure Prairie League was crumbling after their lead singer Larry Gosshorn left. Desperate, they began auditions, and remembered a young bluegrass musician who had opened for them in 1976, Vince Gill. He had turned them down then, loyal to bluegrass, but in 1978, now in LA with Sundance, he reconnected with the band and accepted their offer. Jeff Reeder, the band's sound man, recalled, "We knew he was the one." Vince became the new frontman, playing guitar, mandolin, fiddle, anything with strings. At 21, he was in the biggest spotlight of his career. By 1979, they were recording their 7th studio album Can't Hold Back, the first with Gill. His presence changed everything. His smooth, emotional voice and songwriting blended country warmth with pop charm. Band member Michael Riley called him a breath of fresh air. While the album didn't top charts, it breathed new life into the group and marked the start of something far bigger for Vince. Then came 1980, when everything changed. The band released Firin' Up, featuring their biggest hit ever, Let Me Love You Tonight, which shot up to number 10 on the Billboard Hot 100. Gill sang lead, and his voice carried the track, joined by jazz legend David Sanborn. Vince Gill's talents kept growing. He even played the saxophone, adding a smooth, catchy, and fresh layer to his sound. He didn't stop there. On the same album, he wrote, I'm Almost Ready, and 5 more songs. She's All Mine, You're My True Love, Lifetime of Nighttime, I'll Be Damned, and Jan Lou. The band's sound was evolving, softer, more polished, leaning into country pop, and Vince was leading that change. But good runs don't last forever. In 1981, they released Something in the Night, which had a minor hit, Still Right Here in My Heart. But the album didn't connect like the previous one. Then disaster struck. Casablanca Records, their label, went bankrupt and was sold to Polygram, who dropped most of the roster, including Pure Prairie League. With no label and declining sales, the band was stuck. Vince and guitarist Jeff Wilson left in early 1982. Gill had already begun turning heads as a solo artist, and soon he signed with RCA Records. Pure Prairie League brought in Gary Burr to replace him, but the magic was gone. Vince's time with the band had ended, but his solo journey was only beginning. Around the same time, a personal milestone shaped his future. In California, Vince met Janice Oliver, a member of the country duo Sweethearts of the Rodeo. What began as a friendship quickly became something more, and they married in 1980. On May 5, 1982, they welcomed their daughter, Jennifer Jareen Gill. Professionally, Vince felt he was on the verge of a breakthrough. His hit, Let Me Love You Tonight, had earned attention, and he believed his solo career was about to soar. So when Rodney Crowell invited him to join his band, the Cherry Bombs, Vince declined, determined to make it on his own. But the music industry is unforgiving. As 1982 wore on, his momentum faded, gigs disappeared, and doubt crept in. By early 1983, he called Crowell back and accepted the offer. Joining the Cherry Bombs was one of the best decisions he ever made. The band was stacked with elite musicians like Tony Brown and Emery Gordy Jr., who would go on to shape modern country music. Playing nearly 200 shows a year, it was a grueling schedule, but an invaluable education. Vince sharpened his guitar work, improved his stage presence, and built connections that would last a lifetime. He learned how to survive in the industry not by chasing stardom, but by playing the long game. In 1983, Vince made another bold move. He left Los Angeles and moved to Nashville with Janice and their young daughter. Money was tight, and they lived in a modest rental. Vince took any work he could find, including playing guitar for Rosanne Cash, who was married to Crowell at the time. Touring with Cash was another kind of education. Her band was tight and professional, pushing Vince to grow fast. Balancing fatherhood with late-night rehearsals and financial uncertainty was tough, but it made him stronger and more focused. Meanwhile, Tony Brown, his former bandmate from the Cherry Bombs, had become head of A&R at RCA. Brown never forgot Vince and believed he had something special. Behind the scenes, he pushed hard, pitching Vince's demos and calling in favors. His persistence paid off. In early 1984, Gill signed a solo deal with RCA. It wasn't just about talent, it was about trust. Brown knew Vince could deliver and put his reputation on the line. Vince didn't waste the opportunity. His first solo release, a 6-song EP titled Turn Me Loose, dropped in February 1984. 3 songs made the top 40, with Victim of Life's Circumstances peaking at number 34. It wasn't a blockbuster, but it got people talking. Vince recorded it at Woodland Studios with top session musicians and insisted on making every track count, no filler. That dedication showed. The EP announced him not as just another hopeful, but as a serious artist. Then, on April 10, 1984, things improved dramatically. He was named the Academy of Country Music's top new male vocalist. It was his first major award and felt like the breakthrough he had long chased. But fame didn't arrive overnight. His next album, The Things That Matter, 1985, was solid but didn't make a big splash. Between 1984 and 1988, none of his singles cracked the top 10. Vince kept working, kept refining his craft, and while the spotlight stayed elusive, that ACM award reminded the industry, and him, that he had the voice and the talent. By 1989, Vince Gill was 32 and dangerously close to being forgotten. RCA wasn't sure how to market him, but Tony Brown, now at MCA Records, stepped in once more. Brown convinced the label to take a chance on Vince, a gamble in a business obsessed with youth. But Brown believed Vince's best work was still ahead. MCA gave him stronger songs, a team that understood him, and a new direction. That second chance paid off fast. In October 1989, Vince released When I Call Your Name, and it was unlike anything else on the radio. The album blended country, pop, rock, and bluegrass. It didn't chase trends, it created its own. Oklahoma Swing, a duet with Reba McEntire, brought a traditional sound, while Never Knew Lonely leaned into softer emotions. The title track, though, was the real standout, aching, pure, and unforgettable. Critics praised it. Fans played it on repeat. Nashville finally started to notice. The single climbed to number 2 on the Billboard Country chart, and at the 1990 CMA Awards, it won Single of the Year. A year later, it earned Vince his first Grammy for Best Male Country Vocal Performance. The song that almost didn't get released changed everything. By 1992, the album had gone platinum, over 1 million copies sold. It was rare success for someone over 30 who hadn't yet had a major hit. More than just sales, the platinum record was validation. Radio couldn't get enough. Promoters lined up to book him. The man who once couldn't get a gig had become one of country music's biggest names. And through all the success, Vince didn't become distant. Instead, he became one of Nashville's most respected session players. Big stars wanted him not just for his guitar, but for his harmonies and musical sensitivity. He collaborated with Reba McEntire again, contributing to her Sweet 16 album. He added vocals on Emmylou Harris's Bluebird. Vince Gill had arrived, not just as a performer, but as a trusted musical force in Nashville. Vince Gill's musical range was unmatched. He helped shape Rosanne Cash's 1990 album Interiors, and in a surprising twist, Bonnie Raitt brought him in for her 1991 album Luck of the Draw. Gill could shift seamlessly between country, rock, and blues without missing a beat. From 1992 to 1994, he was everywhere, on country radio, award shows, and sold-out arenas. His voice became the soundtrack of the time, delivering 4 straight #1 hits. I Still Believe in You, in 1992. Don't Let Our Love Start Slipping Away, and One More Last Chance, in 1993, and Trying to Get Over You, in 1994. These weren't flukes. Gill had mastered the perfect blend of traditional country soul and modern polish. I Still Believe in You dominated the charts, spending 20 weeks in the top 10, a major statement in the country world. It was the moment he transformed from a respected artist to a country superstar. But by the end of the decade, things began to shift. In 1998, he released The Key, an album that felt and sounded different, because it was. The songs, including The Key to Life and Kindly Keep It Country, were raw and deeply personal, reflecting the end of his 17-year marriage to Janice Oliver. Critics called it his boldest and most honest work. While it didn't match earlier sales, it didn't need to. It marked a turning point from commercial star to emotional storyteller. Vince's personal life soon became public drama. In 2000, he married Amy Grant, the beloved queen of Christian pop, who had sold over 30 million albums and won 6 Grammys. Fans were stunned. Vince had finalized his divorce in 1998, while Grant divorced her husband Gary Chapman in 1999. The timeline raised eyebrows. They had met back in 1993, and rumors of chemistry had swirled ever since. When they finally went public, it sent shockwaves through both the country and Christian music scenes. For some, it wasn't just gossip, it felt like betrayal. Grant, a symbol of wholesome, faith-driven music, was suddenly the center of controversy. Some Christian radio stations pulled her music. Fans mourned as if they'd lost a spiritual figure. The backlash revealed how fragile public perception can be, especially when religious figures show their humanity. Then in 2013, that past came roaring back. As Gill prepared to perform at the Kaufman Center in Kansas City, protesters from the Westboro Baptist Church showed up with signs declaring, "God hates adultery," and "Vince Gill took another man's wife." Most celebrities would have ignored them. Gill didn't. Calm but firm, he walked up and confronted them. When one protester shouted, "Don't you know divorce plus remarriage equals adultery?" Gill responded, "Jesus also said a lot about forgiveness, about grace. You guys don't have any of that." The video of the confrontation went viral, and fans applauded his courage and composure. In 2020, another challenge appeared. A routine cardiologist visit for Amy Grant led to both of them being flagged for further testing. That's when Gill discovered he had a rare heart condition called PPVR, partial anomalous pulmonary venous return. Less than 1% of people have it, and many never know. In his case, oxygen-rich blood was flowing to the wrong side of the heart, overworking it for decades. He had survived with it unknowingly, but now both he and Amy required open-heart surgery during the height of the COVID pandemic. With hospitals not allowing visitors, they had to recover alone. Gill later called it one of the loneliest times of his life. But when they were briefly allowed to see each other, he said it felt like a weight had been lifted. Together, they pushed through a year filled with silence, surgeries, and slow healing. But tragedy struck again in 2022. While biking near a Nashville golf course, Amy crashed and was knocked unconscious for 10 minutes. She suffered a traumatic brain injury, with severe memory loss, and doctors later discovered a dangerous cyst in her throat, requiring 5 hours of surgery. Afterward, she struggled to sing or walk straight and often joked that she felt drunk, even when sober. Still, Amy remained resilient, calling herself an old car that had been dented and repainted. Through it all, Vince never left her side. In early 2023, he canceled 3 major concerts, not for rest, but to care for Amy. Her recovery was long and painful, and Gill devoted himself to helping her heal. Fans saw it as a quiet display of real love. But Vince was also battling his own issues. He developed polyps on his vocal cords, making singing painful, and underwent multiple surgeries and therapies just to keep performing. Chronic back pain forced him into physical therapy and strict dietary changes, while arthritis added more limitations. Touring became difficult, but he adjusted and kept going. Then came something no one saw coming. In late 2022, a 75-year-old fan named Joyce left a simple comment on Vince Gill's Instagram, hoping he'd come to Boston. What followed was a nightmare. Scammers pretending to be Gill contacted her, moved their chat to Telegram, and convinced her they were in love. Over the course of a year, she sent them her entire life savings, nearly $450,000. They spun lies: that Gill was going through a divorce, that Amy had frozen his assets, and that he needed money to fight an assault accusation. Every time she hesitated, they pressured her more. Joyce believed the scammers so completely that she thought she was married to Vince Gill, and even planned to move to be with him. Her daughter tried to intervene, as did social workers, but Joyce, already struggling with age and memory issues, couldn't see the truth. By the time reality hit, it was too late. Her entire life savings were gone, leaving her financially and emotionally devastated. Vince Gill's team eventually stepped in, issuing a public warning that anyone claiming to be Vince Gill online was an imposter. They clarified that his social media accounts were managed professionally, and he would never message fans privately. But by then, the damage had already been done. Joyce's story wasn't the only one, but it was among the most heartbreaking. Then, in May 2025, Vince faced another health scare, this time, kidney stones painful enough to send him to the hospital. He had to cancel shows in Birmingham and St. Louis. His daughter, Jenny, assured fans that he was recovering, but admitted it had been frightening. Known for always showing up, Gill was forced to take a step back once again. Fans responded with an outpouring of support, flooding social media with prayers and encouragement, reminding everyone that behind the fame was a man who had weathered more than most. Still, Vince didn't slow down. That same month, he kicked off his biggest summer tour in years, a celebration marking 50 years since he left Oklahoma in 1975 to chase his dreams. The tours spanned more than 30 cities and would end with 4 powerful nights at Nashville's Ryman Auditorium, a venue he calls sacred. He's performed there over 100 times, but this solo residency felt different. It was a victory lap. By 2025, Vince Gill had become more than just a country star. He was a survivor, a husband who stood by his wife through medical crises, a man who had endured personal loss, illness, and public criticism, and yet returned to the stage with his heart wide open. His shows were packed, and his voice, repaired and preserved, still held its soulful strength. For this tour, he brought an 8-piece band filled with Nashville's finest: Jim, Moose, Brown on keys, Wendy Moten with her powerhouse vocals, Tom Bukovac on guitar, and a roster of legends who had played with the biggest names in the industry. These weren't just background musicians, they were family. The chemistry on stage was undeniable, full of warmth, humor, and musical brilliance. They traded solos, laughed together, and lifted each other up, just like Vince had lifted everyone around him through the most difficult years of his life.